Our story inevitably begins in Sparta. At a time when pro-Persian sentiments prevailed throughout Hellas, Sparta distinguished itself with an unwavering stance. Many Greek city-states, including flourishing Ionian territories and numerous colonies, actively engaged in trade with the mighty Persian Empire, ensuring their prosperity. It was not uncommon for Hellenes to even serve in the Persian army, gaining a deep understanding of the king's grandeur and influence, recognizing his undeniable might. Such extensive and close ties with the Achaemenid Empire fostered certain attitudes and a desire for cooperation, or at least non-interference. However, Sparta consistently maintained an entirely different, irreconcilable position. Their attitude towards Persia was always unequivocally negative, as if they implicitly declared, "Your Persia is not for us." This deep aversion to the Persian Empire was a defining characteristic of the Spartan spirit. To fully comprehend the reasons for such a unique and steadfast opposition, one must become more intimately acquainted with the Spartans themselves, their way of life, principles, and unwavering will. It is within their essence that the key to unraveling this historical enigma lies, and this acquaintance will be the next step in our narrative. Among all ancient Greek city-states, Sparta stood out as the most totalitarian, despite possessing some democratic features in its political structure. Its governance included a popular assembly, the Supreme Council of Spartiates, and 2 kings. Of particular interest was the unique regulatory system represented by the Council of Ephors. These officials were the only ones permitted to conspicuously remain seated when the king or both kings entered a session, underscoring their exceptional status as guardians of legislation and ancient traditions. For the Spartans, these rules and customs held the greatest value, as they guaranteed their accustomed way of life. So, who were the Spartans? They were Dorians who founded their city-state in the fertile Laconian valley, which was ideally suited for agriculture. Upon arriving in these lands, the Dorians settled the valley, forming several settlements. Subsequently, the 2 most powerful tribes established their dominance, subjugating the others. Thus, the settlement of Sparta emerged, which over time evolved into a major city-state. Its geographical location provided Sparta with relative isolation from the rest of the Peloponnese due to high mountains. However, there were convenient valleys allowing them to meet enemies, 1 pass and 2 northern approaches leading directly to Sparta. Between the Collins mountain plateau and the Cetacean range, 2 V-shaped valleys converged towards the city-state itself. It was from these 2 dominant tribes, most likely, that Sparta's system of 2 kings arose. Perhaps at some point, they decided that the pursuit of absolute power by a single ruler was impractical, preferring a system with 2 kings, supplemented by an oligarchic regulation of their authority. This unique system functioned successfully. It is well known that Greece was a deeply slave-owning country. Despite a relatively small number of slaves, they ensured the Greeks' accustomed way of life. For instance, in an average city-state, mornings were dedicated to labor, while afternoons were for social life, including gymnasium training, philosophical discussions at symposia, and so forth. Sparta, however, went even further. It was decided that the local population conquered by the Dorians should labor, while the Spartans, noble warriors, should engage in nothing but military affairs. Their primary task was warfare. This is why Sparta had the deepest social stratification among all city-states. Spartiates constituted the highest stratum of society, being full citizens and the core of the Spartan phalanx. Their lives were dedicated to the art of war, to always remain the best warriors and be ready for any confrontation with the Helots. The Helots were semi-slaves, but in Sparta, there was no private slave ownership. This could be called communist or socialist slavery, as all slaves were common property. These communal Helot slaves were obligated to work for the valiant Spartan warriors. And what did the Spartans themselves do? They produced other Spartans. Sparta had a very peculiar system of upbringing. Spartan men typically lived in barracks, while women remained in their homes. Men were not allowed to reside permanently at home, they spent most of their lives in a close-knit male barracks community. They appeared at home infrequently. If a Spartan wished to see his wife, he had to absent himself without permission to produce a new Spartan. This was explained by the Spartans' belief: a man living long without his wife would miss her so much that their reunion would be passionate, and the more passionate the night, the higher the probability of conceiving a strong, valiant Spartan boy. The same applied to women. Spartan women actively participated in sports and possessed significantly more rights than women in most other city-states. They bore great responsibilities and were mistresses of their homes, though calling their dwellings estates would be an exaggeration, as Spartans lived as ascetically as possible. Women had the right to engage in sports, and even a statue of a victorious Spartan woman in competitions has survived. For Spartans, this was the norm, while other Greeks, observing them, exclaimed, "How can they live like this? It's a nightmare." However, despite seemingly attractive factors like pluralism or the outwardly prominent role of women, the reality was entirely different. It is crucial to understand that this entire system was geared towards creating a rigid, traditionalist society entirely focused on oppressing everyone around them. This included the Helots and Perioeci, non-full citizens of Sparta. The Perioeci, however, fought in the phalanx alongside the Spartiates. They could live around Sparta, engaging in agriculture, crafts, and other pursuits. There was quite a large population of them in Sparta. Their phalanxes were typically positioned further, on the left flank, as the right flank was considered the most important and vulnerable. A warrior's right hand held a spear or a Greek sword, machaira, while the left held a shield. When the phalanx moved, the left flank was fully covered by the shields of the subsequent ranks. On the right, everything was open, so mounted archers and skirmishers, attacking from the right, could inflict serious damage. All phalanx clashes aimed to outflank the enemy, envelop their army with their left flank, that is, to breach their right flank, disrupt their order, and lead to defeat. In the 7th century, the Spartans conquered numerous tribes, suppressed all resistance to their authority, and subjugated them. Indeed, many atrocities were committed against the non-Spartan, initially non-Dorian, and then non-Spartan population. The local inhabitants did not merely dislike the Spartans, as some sources write, they openly hated them. As one Helot living near Sparta recounted, "I would gladly eat these Spartans, just kill and eat them. It would bring me pleasure, and it wouldn't matter whether they were women or men." All of this was very straightforward. Take, for example, the younger generation. Stories are known about the agoge, a special school where boys were intentionally starved and forced to steal. Only those caught were punished. Those who weren't caught were considered clever. There is a story about a boy who caught a fox and was carrying it to prepare. He was met by adult Spartiates and asked what he was carrying. He did not confess. The fox was still alive and gnawed at his insides, and the boy died, but did not confess. Why? Because for Spartans, shame was the worst thing. Greeks were social people, and for them, the worst social phenomenon was shame. Shame before other Spartans, shame for showing weakness, shame before enemies. In short, to be shamed and remembered as a weakling, that was terrible for them. Therefore, everything done to prepare a true Spartan for adult life was aimed at developing cruelty, decisiveness in their actions, and fearlessness in taking other people's lives. For example, Helots were very often intentionally plied with drink, paraded, and dressed in certain animal skins to show that they were pathetic barbarians, while Spartans were civilized and valiant. They were paraded before youths at symposia. Spartans also had their own feasts, though they were called differently, to demonstrate, "Look at them, friends, how pathetic, how disgusting they are." And very often, at the end of such an evening, a Helot was simply killed. Killing a Helot was not considered a sin. For Sparta, it was permissible. If, for example, you struck a citizen of another city-state, that was a problem. But if you justified why you killed a Helot, for example, he pushed you, insulted you, or tried to shame you, it was considered an on-the-spot execution. Naturally, there was no fervent love from the local Helots for the Spartans. Spartans also drank their famous vinegar blood broth, which was absolutely inedible for other Greeks. They did this, boasting to each other and to the rest of Greece, demonstrating how mighty, resilient, and courageous they were as warriors, capable of eating even that. Some authors even say that this broth was not simply made from the blood of a pig or cow. Men would go into the forest, kill wild boars, just like ancient Greek heroes, drag them home while still warm, make broth from them, and eagerly consume it throughout the evening along with wine and everything else. This was a display of ultimate masculinity. And it was indeed a very powerful public relations stunt for other city-states. The authority and reputation of the Persian army made it an extremely undesirable enemy for any Greek city-state. However, Sparta's reputation amidst all this was that they disliked the Persians. Indeed, even when Athens would say, "The Persians are perfectly fine, why are you so against them?" And when all of Greece traded with them, they, in principle, had little idea what Persia truly was. Only after the Ionian revolt, when it was brutally suppressed, did the Greeks realize, what? Persia is an enemy? Oh my God, how wrong we were. Oh no. And then some cities, although a few of them would later be forced to support the Persians, believing they could never win this war, most accounts would focus on these 27 to 28 city-states who believed in their victory until the very end and ultimately achieved it.